What's up, my comic comrades? 2020 is still nice and fresh, and with a brand new year, we thought it would be nice to get back to the basics a little bit. One of the things we get asked about a lot is how to start reading comic books, which is actually a good question because with the insane amount of titles amongst multiple publishers with characters and stories that span many decades, it could be very intimidating and overwhelming when you're first diving in. Well, with that in mind, today we got 10 tips for new comic readers and any of you who have been on the fence or hesitant to dive into the deep end of the wonderful world of comics. So if that's you, fear not, we got you, boo. First thing you have to do, which is very obvious, is pick a character or team. If you love the Spider-Man movies, start reading Spider-Man. If you love the Justice League Unlimited cartoon, pick up the Justice League title. For most people, movies, TV shows, and video games is their segue to start reading the actual comics these movies and shows pull from. I know that's definitely true for me, as I say it all the time, but Batman the Animated Series and the Tim Burton Batman movies are what got me to start reading Batman comics. And then from there, it steamrolled into me reading Spider-Man, X-Men, Justice League, Superman, and so on. And trust me, Marvel and DC have no shortage of different types of characters to choose from, all the way to godlike characters like Superman, and then ground level characters like Daredevil. Another tip I will give you is if you like characters and stories that are more ground level and a little more relatable, you may gravitate to the Marvel Universe a little more, as it's more based in science and real cities like New York. But if you like big epic characters with incredible power and a massive multiverse, DC may be more for you. But with that said, this is just a generalization. Obviously, Marvel also has incredibly powerful characters, and DC has a ton of street level characters. However, once you find a character you want to read, that leads us to number 2. Next thing you're going to want to do is find a comic book shop. Now, I know not everyone has a local comic book shop, and I have an answer for that with tip number 3. But if you do have a local comic book shop, go there and introduce yourself to the owner or employees. Most shops are very friendly and willing to help out. Although the comic book community may seem toxic and very opinionated at times, in general, it's a fantastic community and one I am very happy to be a part of. You could literally go there and be like, hey, I want to start reading the Fantastic Four. What's a good comic book to jump in on? And I'm sure they'll give you several suggestions. And then once you find a title or titles you like at the comic book shop, most shops have a pull list where you could tell them all the series you're reading, and then every month they'll pull the newest issue for that title and put them aside for you, so you could just go in every 2 weeks or once a month and they'll have all the comics you're reading that month waiting for you up front. That way you don't have to search for them on the rack or worry about them being sold out. But like I said, I understand a lot of people don't have a comic book shop near them, so here's tip number 3. Next tip would be use ComiXology. That service is your friend. ComiXology is the #1 platform for digital comics. I mean, they're owned by freaking Amazon. ComiXology has thousands and thousands of comics, and they're updating and adding more every single week. So if you don't have a comic book shop or can't get to one, ComiXology releases all the exact titles every Wednesday, just like a comic shop does, just digitally. I know me personally, I use ComiXology all the time and read more digital now than print. Don't get me wrong, I still have a handful of titles that I always buy at my local comic book shop and still like to collect trades and back issues, but as far as all the new current books, it's almost completely digital for me now. It's just more convenient. Traveling, I can read comics on a tablet, or in bed without having to worry about a lamp or worrying about bending or tearing a page. So for me, I'll always love print and want to have print issues and trades of my favorite books, but again, digital is just more convenient. Another thing about ComiXology is you could also subscribe to your favorite titles. It's pretty much their version of a pull list. So when you subscribe to a title, it'll automatically buy the issue when it's released every month, and you'll just have it there waiting for you on the app. They also offer ComiXology Unlimited for $6 a month that gives you access to over 20,000 digital comics, graphic novels, and manga from publishers like DC, Marvel, Dark Horse, Image, and way more. Again, ComiXology is your friend. I love it, and they're not even sponsoring the show. It's just true. Tip number 4, trades are the easiest way to dive in as they usually contain an entire story arc or at least parts of the entire story arc in sequential order. So if you see a Spider-Man comic on the wall that looks interesting, don't just get into that comic right away because it might be in the middle of a story arc and you'll have no idea what's going on. Instead, find out if there's a trade for that title already by searching online on ComiXology or asking someone at a comic book shop. That way you could start from the beginning of that title or at least the beginning of that story arc. So again, I can't stress enough, trades are the best way to jump in and start reading your favorite character and not be confused, as they usually always start from the beginning of a story arc. Tip number 5 is to start with a comic that's not in main comic continuity. Most of everything Marvel and DC publishes every month is all going to be in the same continuity or shared universe. Meaning whatever's going on in the Batman title at any given time could cross over into the Green Lantern title. Because again, most of DC and Marvel's titles are shared universes. The easiest way to explain this to new readers is it's the MCU before the MCU. It's where Marvel Studios got it from. Same with the DCEU. With that said, if you start with stuff that isn't in their main continuity or shared universe, it's a whole lot less confusing because they're self-contained stories. The best example of this is the highly popular and awesome Injustice Gods Among Us comic book series. That is a self-contained story and series that has nothing to do with the main line of DC titles. So literally, all you have to do is pick up the first trade of Injustice and then follow the reading order after that. Elseworlds books are also self-contained stories where that's the only book you have to read, like Superman Red Son, Batman Gotham by Gaslight, even The Dark Knight Returns. Though not an Elseworlds book, it's a look at a possible future for Batman. So anything like that. You also have Marvel Zombies, Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, all self-contained series and stories. But I think you guys get the point, so let's move on. Next, I would say is try to find a writer or artist you really like. I'd probably say artist first because you won't know if you like a writer until you read several of his or her books. But art, you'll know right away. For instance, one of my favorite artists out right now is Jason Fabok. Meaning any book he works on, I'll at least read the first 2 issues because I enjoy looking at his art. Which is why I'm very thankful he's drawing the 3 Jokers story with Jeff Johns. God, I'm excited. So finding an artist you like is going to be somewhat easy. Again, as you just look at the comic and you'll know if you like it. But finding a writer is gonna be a little harder. So I have a few suggestions. A few of my favorite writers would be Scott Snyder, Donny Cates, Peter Tomasi, Jeff Johns, Jason Aaron, Jonathan Hickman, Josh Williamson, Alan Moore, Frank Miller, Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Brian K. Vaughan, Dan Slott, Tom Taylor, and Mark Waid. I mean, I could literally name so many more, but those are some of my favorite off the top of my head. The point is, pretty much anything those writers have written is solid, if not great. Tip number 7 is read the classics. Now you may be saying, how do I know what the classics are? Well, Marvel and DC are great with collecting classic stories for all of their characters. For instance, Marvel has their Masterworks volumes, which collects classic stories for all of their characters. Literally, there's Masterworks collections for Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, X-Men, the Hulk, and so on and so forth. Then DC has their Celebration hardcovers, which collects a bunch of the best stories for that particular character. It's like a 300 to 400 page hardcover book. They literally have one for Aquaman, Batman, Flash, Shazam, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, the Joker, the JSA, and the list goes on. And yes, both Marvel's Masterworks and DC Celebration hardcovers are available digitally on ComiXology as well. Moving along, you have to know your starting points. Now, you're never gonna know everything about comics. I've been reading comics since I could read, basically, and there's still a ton I don't know. But as far as starting points go, Marvel and DC has made it pretty easy over the last several years to just kind of jump in, as they've rebooted their universes several times over the past several years. For Marvel, you have the 2015 All New, All Different Marvel Initiative, and then they're like, oh, we should change things again, in 2016 giving us Marvel Now. Then in 2017, they're like, how about one more time? Let's do Marvel Legacy. And then 2018, Marvel gave us Marvel Fresh Start. Basically, every year since 2015 has been a starting place for new readers of the Marvel Universe. Now, all of that isn't an exact science, but it does mean there's been plenty of jumping on points for Marvel the past few years. So any one of those will do. Although I personally would say just start with 2018's Fresh Start. As for DC, back in 2011, they rebooted their entire line of books and universe with the New 52, which was a perfect jumping on point for new readers, even though it had longtime comic book fans mad with some of the changes they made, but that's neither here nor there. After that, DC was like, you know what? Fans are right. We did stray too far from what these characters were and what they meant to people for so long. And then course corrected with a soft reboot in the form of DC Rebirth, which I absolutely loved, and now we're getting into another reboot sometime this year with the DC 5G initiative. Although I did enjoy several titles from the New 52, like the Justice League book and Batman and some others, I will say that the DC Rebirth one-shot written by Jeff Johns is the perfect jumping on point for DC. Tip number 9 would be getting a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, DC Universe, or ComiXology, like I mentioned earlier. ComiXology is probably going to be the most bang for your buck if you could only subscribe to one, as they're going to have books from different publishers like Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, Image, and so on. But if you're a Marvel fanatic or DC fanatic and you know you definitely want to read books from Marvel or DC, those services are great too. Marvel Unlimited will give you access to thousands of their comics. and it's just $5 a month or $60 a year. And they're only 3 to 6 months behind with the books that are currently available on stands. Meaning any Marvel book that just came out this past Wednesday will be available on Marvel Unlimited within 3 to 6 months. But if DC is more your thing, try out the DC Universe app, which not only gives you access to thousands of DC comics, which they're constantly always updating, but also access to their original series like Titans, Doom Patrol, Harley Quinn, Young Justice Outsiders, as well as a library to their animated series, TV shows, and live-action movies. The DC Universe app is $7.99 a month or $75 a year. It's a little more expensive than Marvel's Unlimited, but that's because you don't just get comics. You also get access to TV shows, cartoons, and movies. No matter what you choose, or if you get all of them like me because I'm an addict and I have a problem, each one is extremely helpful for new comic book readers, as they have a vast library of comics that would take you years to even put a dent into. Last but certainly not least is don't be afraid to ask questions. Like I said earlier, I've been reading comics since I learned how to read, and there's still a ton I don't know. There's no way to learn everything. Most of these characters like Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, Iron Man have been around for decades with thousands of appearances and stories in comics. And I think a lot of comic book fans are scared to admit they don't know a lot about comics because it would paint them as not a true fan. But how can everyone be expected to know everything? It's impossible. I've been a comic book fan basically my entire life. It's literally my job to talk about comics, and again, there's still so much I'm constantly learning on a weekly basis. And doing this for a living has made me learn so much more than I did before I started doing variants. So like anything in life, just ask questions. It's the only way to learn. Anyway, these are just 10 tips to help you make your comic book reading experience better, and not be afraid to dive in and start reading comics, because I truly think it's the best form of storytelling. It actually took technology decades to be able to put the things we see in comics on the big screen. With comics, your imagination is the limit, and that's why I love it so much. But with that said, if you have any tips you want to share with the Variant Nation, feel free to do so in the comment section below. And that's going to bring another episode of Variant to a close, but if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to click this one right here. And if you like what we do in all our videos, be sure to subscribe and like our videos. It helps us out. But I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things comics.